Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. It is absolutely a delight to introduce you to our special guest today, Charlene Li. For the past 2 decades, Charlene Li has been helping people see the future. She's an expert on digital transformation, leadership, customer experience, and the future of work. She's the author of 6 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Open Leadership, and co-author of the critically acclaimed book, Groundswell. Her latest book is the bestseller, The Disruption Mindset. She currently serves as the Chief Research Officer at PA Consulting, an end-to-end innovation consultancy. Named one of the most creative people in business by Fast Company, Charlene is a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Business School and lives in San Francisco. And Charlene, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today. Thank you so much for joining us here and really being willing to share your research, your experiences with the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm so excited to have this conversation.
So, how about we kick things off by having you share a little bit about your story? We want to know a little bit about you. How did you get to doing what you do today?
I know it's kind of like nobody sets out to be an analyst, an author I never thought I'd be doing this, but I grew up in Detroit, the daughter of immigrants. And as you can imagine, growing up Asian in the 60s and 70s in Detroit, there weren't very many people who looked like me. And so I was usually the only person of color in my entire class. And so I got very used to standing out, used to being a disruption just by my presence. And so have always taken a very counterintuitive, like, I'm standing out anyways, I may as well raise my hand, and got very, very comfortable forming the friendships and the alliances to give me that comfort level and that safety level to do lots of different radical things. And so got really comfortable with change and disruption because just by my mere presence, it was creating these disturbances and changes happening. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to do after business school, one of the things I really looked at was this thing called the internet, because it was 1993 and this new thing was coming out. And I said, wow, that's going to be game changing. Where can I go where this is going to have an impact? And I went into newspapers. That's not something people usually do coming out of Harvard Business School, but I went to newspapers, was at the very forefront of the internet being born, and have been just fascinated by how technology has formed these new ways for us to have relationships. Fast forward, and the thing that my research has really been focused on in the past few years was, with given all these changes and disruptions, I was really curious that some companies, and not technology companies, but big banks and educational institutions and telecom companies and utilities, even cement companies, were going through tons and tons of change over and over again without seemingly skipping a beat. And I wanted to know what's in the water that they were drinking, what was in their culture, in their leadership. What was it that allowed them to do this, to be the energizer bunnies of disruption? Because I wanted more of that. I knew that other leaders would want some of that too. So that's been the focus of my work today.
Oh, so exciting. And I imagine everybody listening who is seeking to create some positive change to evolve their teams, their companies is thinking, all right, tell me how to do it. How do I create this organization or this culture that allows us to go from disruption to disruption without skipping a beat?
Yeah, there are 3 things that I laid out in my book. One is being able to see the future, really focus on the needs of your future customers and not your customers of today. Because if you don't know what the future looks like, if you don't have an inkling or even a guess at what that future is going to look like, you're just going to focus on the needs today and you won't prepare for that future. The other thing is leaders are very focused on driving the organization, creating a movement to go on this journey to the future. So they define the future, create the momentum, the resources, have the right people, and say, we're going to go on this. And they create that momentum and that movement. And the third thing I am fascinated by is that you have to create a culture that's capable of dealing with flux. And it's made up of beliefs. And this is what you and your audience talk about all the time. It's the beliefs, the mindsets that you have. And this was the key that these organizations prepare themselves for flux. They use processes and structures, and they have rituals and symbols and stories that are all about change, all about being able to see the future, to be able to create and support these movements. So they use process and structure, these things that we think of as holding back innovation. Instead, they use them to accelerate it. And so they have processes, really good processes for change, not processes to embed and to hold on to the status quo. So that was fascinating. And as a result, the reason why these companies can do so well is that they have that infrastructure to hold everybody in place, to give people that scaffolding so they can make all these audacious changes because they know how to work with each other. The relationships aren't disrupted in the organizations. Those are strong and solid. The work that they do is highly disruptive.
Wow. So, would it be okay if we dived in a little bit on each of those three aspects? Because, some people might be thinking, okay, see the future, my future client, how do I do that, right? The current one is right in my face, right, with all of his or her issues. Like, how do I even go there?
Yeah, again, it's asking that current client, like, what are your future needs? But it's also looking around the edges and saying, who are the other clients that are coming up and emerging? And these might be clients that you don't serve very well today, but they might represent a leading edge need that you could fulfill really well if you focus on that need and actually say, well, that's something we have to explore. It's so easy to get blinded by all the brilliance and the light of our current customers and our current clients because they're beautiful. They love us. We love them. They pay us a lot of money. They're highly profitable. Like, why did we want to look anywhere else? But when you realize that this current customer may or may not be your future customer, what are the emerging needs that they have? What are the emerging needs of other people who are on the edges that may or may not be coming out and being so expressive right now? It is the classic innovator's dilemma that as incumbents that Clay Christensen talked about, the incumbents have all of the great customers. And so all the innovative startup companies have to go around the edges. And if you're not looking around those edges too, as somebody who is successful in this space, you're going to lose out to these people who are willing to hustle and will beat you to the punch. So we, as profitable, successful businesses and leaders, have every advantage in the world, every advantage compared to these smaller companies and startups. The biggest disadvantage we have are really profitable customers that can blind us from seeing any of those opportunities. So the number one way to see the future is to put on those disruption sunglasses. Don't let your current customers blind you and look for those opportunities that may not look like great opportunities, but you have to go and explore them because they could be your future.
I agree. And, kind of thinking through if I were a leader that was invited to do this with very limited resources, limited time, a lot of overwhelm and change, of course, how could I possibly take some of the resources away from my current customers because I might not be able to serve my current customers as well if I shift my focus or expand my focus?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not completely shifting, just taking a little time, even with your existing customers, by serving them and just looking one step away from those super awesome customers to just one adjacent customer to say, what are their needs? Why are we not serving them so well? What would it take to make them raving fans of ours? What is it that they're getting that is 80% there, but not 100% there? And just by focusing that shift a little bit, can get you into this mode of exploration and curiosity to see what else is out there. Because if we don't do that on a regular basis to say, well, where are those growth opportunities? We will not continue to grow and see where things are. You can always say, no, that's not something we want to do. That's not a good opportunity. We're going to still focus on this. But you have to be honest with yourself. If you don't see any growth opportunities, you don't see any places for you to explore and invest in for the future, then something's wrong because the world is changing. You have to invest in that future. It's a question of what and where. And so taking just a few minutes, because it literally takes minutes, not hours and days and months to do this strategy review. He says, where do you think from your gut, from your experience, your knowledge. Where do you think some of the opportunities are? Put them down on a piece of paper and start exploring them with the people and the conversations you have every day. Do you see this as an opportunity? Do you see this trend happening? And just making it top of mind, because if you don't do this as a leader, who else is going to do it? You as a top person in the organization have that responsibility to take on that work and delegate everything else to other people who can do the work, so that you carve out that time to do the work that no one else can do.
Yeah, and I sense that also what's important here, especially in a very hierarchical kind of organization, to give a voice to the frontline people that are there directly with the customers to ask those questions, or be extra curious about what might make things even better, so that we can even have a choice as to what to do moving forward, because there are more choices.
That is such a great point to bring out, because something that's changed over the past 5-10 years or so, this is the big innovation that, again, people like Clay Christensen really believe that big organizations couldn't do this, but they can now, and they are now, because the ability to sense, the ability to listen, to understand how markets are changing, how individual customers and clients are changing, is now so much stronger. And if you think about your organization as not just an execution organ, but a listening organ too as well, where the orders and execution things flow from the top, but the information and the data flows in from the bottom. That's incredibly powerful, where one individual at the front line can say, hey, I've noticed this one thing. I know that we're thinking about the future customer. I think I just found one. But it requires that they know that we're thinking about future customers, have a model of who they are, be on the lookout for them. And then when they find one, go, boy, everybody, come over here. We just found one. Let's go listen to them. Let's bring them in. And that feeds upon itself, because now you have hundreds, if not thousands of people looking for those opportunities because they know. I like to ask people 3 questions. Can every single one of your employees answer these 3 questions? Who is our future customer or client? What's our strategy to meet their needs? And what is my role, my individual role in making that strategy a success? And every single employee should be able to answer that question, those 3 questions. It seems so
Remarkable.
simple, right? It seems so simple, but executives were trying to be like, I don't think my executive team could even answer those questions to you, let alone my entire company.
Yeah, and it is about creating that safety to be able to share, and rewarding, right? Recognizing even when things are not necessarily adopted, but just people being willing to share some possibilities that came up for them, really celebrating, making it fun, and just kind of big celebration when ideas come up. I sense that that's a big part of this as well.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. The recognition, the fact that somebody heard me and saw me, acknowledged that I had something to contribute, goes such a long way. And needs to happen at all levels of the organization. But I really have noticed that the most important leadership responsibility, leadership relationship, is at that front line to their first line manager. And yet that is the one area that we really fall down on across all organizations in terms of preparing individual contributors to be managers, to be leaders. And so we always need to have this process of creating leadership in all aspects of everyone's work. That leadership isn't something that's a title. It is a responsibility for all of us to see, when we see a need for a change to happen and there's a void there, we will step into that void and lead to create that change. And that those frontline managers are the ones that really hold the culture in place, hold everyone, create that safety zone. And we don't invest nearly enough in making that happen.
And so, if we may shift our attention now to the momentum part of it, to kind of creating that, what tips, suggestions do you have for people about how to create that movement?
It's, I think, first of all, the recognition that you need to build a movement. Just the fact that it's a necessary thing, because nobody ever said to a leader, you get a promotion like, hey, great, go create a movement now. Nobody ever said that to you, right? But if you want to create audacious change, you have to realize that to get from point A to point B, it can't just be you driving this. You're going to need followers, and your first followers are so important. Now, again, you may be assigned, you may get a title, you may inherit a team, but do they really believe in you? Will they really go on this audacious journey filled with obstacles and challenges? So if you are going to do this, then you need to think from day one, how am I going to create a movement where this belief in the future is adopted by everybody else? And at least by one person who can then themselves become a leader of that movement. And then what happens is that it sustains itself and it grows because other people want to join that movement too. I think a powerful quote comes from this wonderful book called The New Power. And they said, it's not a movement until it moves without you. And we as leaders oftentimes need to feel like we need to be at the very front, carrying the flag and waving everyone on. That's not the case. It can't be about us. It has to be about our purpose. And so when you have a strong purpose, you have a strong objective, you have clear values about how we're going to do this together as a team, because that's what values aligns, is how are we going to work together. So, and it gives us the foundation to have those difficult conversations, to hash out how will we work together, because we're not working together right now really well. That then creates the foundations and the elements for a movement to form. But it requires this really clear objective of what we're aiming for. What are we trying to achieve?
And so, what if the individual employees' values don't necessarily align with the vision for the movement?
Yeah, there's two things. We can have various types of values. You don't have to have every single value aligned, but I think there's two parts. Do you agree with the purpose? Do you agree with the strategy? Do you agree with that we need to go on this journey? Because if you fundamentally don't think we should be on this journey, then we have to have a different discussion. Should you be on this journey with us, period? Because we can't have anybody who goes, well, I don't know. Do I want to go on this journey or not? There's a time and a place for that discussion. And there's a time and place to say, either you're coming on this journey or you're not. So that consideration, the skepticism, the doubt, the questioning, that's appropriate when you're beginning the journey. It's like, what path are we going to take? Where are we going to go? But once you decide to go on that journey, once you're on that path, you have to be so focused on that. And if somebody is just not ready to be on it with the fullest compassion possible, you have a conversation, say, where would it be a better fit for you? Let me help you find that place where it will be much more aligned with how you see the world and how you want to be in that space. Because this is not a fit. And it's just causing us all a world of hurt. And we don't have those conversations because it's a tough one, because we feel bad. And it's such a better place when you can acknowledge it and be able to support each other in your own separate journeys. So, but it's a different thing if we say we are aligned in the purpose, but we have different ways of getting there. And that's alignment of strategies and what we're going to do. Now, you may have different values or different ways of thinking about the values, but hopefully there are enough connected values that you share, that they form that foundation to be able to allow you to work together. And it's not to say that some values are better than others. We just have different priorities of what we really value, things that are really important to us. And so understanding what's really important to you, what's really important to me, what are the common points, allows us that alignment to be able to find some things that we can hang on together. And that's why the value is being very clear in an organization to say, this is what we believe. This is how we're going to work. This is how we're going to behave. And that with a strong alignment against that and agreement, because we have values here, but we can interpret them in very, very different ways. How we actually show up and behave, it could be really different. I'll give a quick example. One organization had the value of respect. And historically, it was everybody has a voice, and then anybody can voice an opinion. We're going to respect it. It morphed over time to you have to have respect for authority and tenure and seniority. So if somebody says something, you can't question them on it. It was just the opposite. It's the same value, but interpreted in two very different ways. So that leads to a lot of conflict if you're not aligned on the meaning of that value to each person.
It's so clear to me what you're sharing, and ultimately it's about choice, giving people agency. Because if we say, all right, this is the what, right? This is the outcome, the what we want to achieve, and let's co-create the how. We'll figure it out as we go, we'll get some help, but we're grounded in that purpose, that vision, for, the future client or whatever that disruption is about. And it really creates that team coherence, because at that higher level, we are one. We are one. We as a team are one. And then, of course, different opinions underneath that, but we can always ground back in that. And it's almost like the heart of the movement is that common vision. It's not the person necessarily who, is spearheading the movement. Now, again, I'm curious as to your response to what I'm sharing. The research. So what relevance, if anything, does that have?
Well, I think I like the way I put it is that purpose, those values are narratives. So that like the big arches of story, but each person writes their own story on that narrative. They bring their own experiences, they bring their own perspectives, their own interpretations of this. So one of my favorite exercises to do as a team is to say, how did the organizational values, how did your personal values come to life for you over the past week or month? How did they show up? How did you exercise them? How did you use them to advance something, to resolve a conflict? How did you live our values? And it brings it to mind because it brings them to life. You hear it from different people. It's the same values, the same narrative, but it's a different story that we can each individually tell. And it's rich and it's appreciated and it's valid. And that again reinforces this commitment to each other that we are on the same path and we're on this together. And there are many, many ways to tell that story, not a single one. And that's what creates that movement, is that each of us can participate in our own unique ways, and it's valid and it's valued.
Thank you. And so if we were to zoom in even a little bit more on that, let's say there are different beliefs, right? And values essentially are clusters of beliefs. So let's say we're coming in with different belief systems. What, if anything, can we do to honor and also to create maybe a little bit more flux, a little bit more flexibility, to allow us to accept or at least perceive other people's opinions and viewpoints?
Right. There are some values and beliefs that are immutable. Um, just like some things around like people have agency and empowerment versus command and control. Those are two very, very different belief systems that I don't believe people can make good decisions on their own. So I need to make it for them. And then they want that. And we just have to tell them exactly what to do, give them all the resources, and they do exactly what they do, and they'll be happy with that. Versus I'm going to give them broad parameters and I'm going to let them decide how they're going to accomplish it. Two very, very different beliefs. And you can move them towards each other by asking the person who's believing in the more command control, well, can we modulate that to be giving them a lot more structure, but gives them some decision making, some agency in the very beginning to be able to formulate that. So you can move people's belief systems, you can move people's behaviors in one way or the other, slowly but surely. But at some point, it's going to challenge those fundamental beliefs. And so that's where the question of what do you fundamentally believe in? And can that be modulated by the behaviors and show up? At some point, it may not be able to be moved. And for us to acknowledge that difference and to say, well, what is the role going to be then? Is there a space enough in this organization to handle all these different wide ranging of beliefs? How far out can we go and sustain still some coherence in our culture?
Yeah, and one of the things that comes up often in the work that I do with some organizations is that you've got the people who've been there for some time and they've got certain perspectives about the right way to do things and, handle clients and processes, all that stuff. And then you've got some newer blood, so to speak, in the organization that's like, oh, what if we did this and what if we did that? And so there's this conflict, right? The old way versus some new possibilities. And it can create almost like a paralysis, right, in terms of change, because we don't really do anything different than we do now because there's a lot of resistance from the top. So
Right.
what if anything can we do in those situations?
I think that, again, you hear things like, well, we've always done it this way. And we tried that in the past. Look where it got us. And, we're successful in doing this. Why should we change anything? And I completely understand and appreciate that. And it's partly because change hasn't happened well in the past because there wasn't the strong container to be able to help make it work. But I also say, do you truly believe that nothing in our environment has changed? Truly, truly believe that we can sustain being exactly the same without any change whatsoever and be able to be competitive and survive. Let's look at the world and the environment. These are the places where it's changing, which is why, again, I say, see the needs of the customer. There's no better way to create accountability than to ask your customers, how are we doing? And to ask the right customers, how are we doing? Not just your best ones, but the ones on the edges too, as well. These are opportunities for us to improve. Do we have the courage to ask that question? And then even more courage to look at the answers and be able to assess and say, yeah, we're not doing that well in these areas. We're doing great here. Let's acknowledge and recognize that. But here are opportunities for change and growth. Now we're going to explore that even deeper and make that the reasons why we do this. And the reason why many people just do not want to change is because they haven't got that safety. What does it mean for them to change? They are being asked to go from one place to an unknown place. And that space in the middle, I call it the messy middle or the liminal space, can be really intimidating because I don't know where we're going to end up. Until I know exactly where I'm going to end up, or at least given some assurances that we can be safe along this journey, why would I leave this place of comfort and joy? So it's all very logical, very, very logical when you look at it from that perspective, when you have empathy for the person who feels and looks stuck from the outside. They're not stuck. They're doing great. So how are you going to move and help them see the opportunity? It can absolutely can happen. And every organization, even the fastest moving organizations, have these people. I call them the skeptics, the worried skeptics. And every organization has them because relative to everyone else, it's just like, I need to go a little bit slower than everyone. But I would also question this need to get everyone from point A to point B as quickly as possible, because you lose that liminal space. You lose this opportunity to really explore. And it can be a wondrous time of creativity and exploration. It can also be an extremely scary time of fear and the unknown. So how you contain that space, how you approach it, makes the hugest difference in how that change happens.
And the word that comes to mind is resilience.
Yes. Yes.
So what are some of those markers in your work to let people know that that movement, if you will, is already underway, that the momentum is being built, that the organization is more resilient to be able to handle that? What are some of the measures?
The number one measure is, are people clear? Those three questions that I asked, are people clear on what we're trying to achieve? And are they absolutely focused on doing that? It's a simple question you can ask in a pulse survey. What is our strategy? Can you articulate? How confident are you at being able to articulate what our strategy is? And see if it's really strong confidence or low confidence. I was at a marketing meeting with a CMO and she called out to people because I asked, what's your strategy? And she goes, well, they can all tell you because we spent a week on it just last month. And nobody could tell me a single element of that strategy. They had worked on it, put it in a PowerPoint, and then shoved into a drawer. And it wasn't something that they lived every day. So I go ask, what's your strategy? What's your future? What's your strategy? And what's your impact going to be in you as individuals? So that's how you can tell. When you have great confidence that your team knows all this is aligned on this, you are creating a movement because then they will know what their individual contribution is, and they're excited about it, and they're going to work with each other to accomplish that. You've just created a movement that takes on a life of its own. People see us, they're engaged, they can't wait to get to it, they come into work organized and excited and energized. There's no stopping it at this point. You couldn't even stop it if you wanted to.
And I imagine that a lot of people listening, not just the CMOs, right? But they're like, wow, we had this training, we did this thing, but it's not happening. Like, what can I do to really add the momentum? Because it was like excitement for a few days or a few weeks and then right back to the old ways.
But how much are you focusing on it? Are you talking about this? I like to tell the story of Jeff Weiner, who was the former CEO of LinkedIn. He's now the chairman. And he had this habit of walking into every single meeting, internally or externally, introducing himself and saying, the purpose of LinkedIn is to connect the world's professionals. And one of the ways we do this, and he'll talk about a strategy point, he'll talk about a value, he'll talk about something. And he did this in every single meeting. An employee asked him, when are you going to stop doing this? Because you do this every single time. And he said, I will stop doing it when people stop looking surprised. The reality is we forget, we get distracted, we get focused on the particular fire or problem that we have going on. We get pulled into some meeting and we lose sight of who we're working for, how we're going to get there, and what my role is in making that a success. And we're reminded over and over again by our leaders, we go, oh yeah, that's right. We need to focus on this. When we say it to each other, this is why we're here, this is our purpose, then we remember, oh yeah, that's right. And it becomes ingrained in everything that we do. Purpose-led, purpose-driven companies are very rare. And you can tell it because the minute you sit down talking with somebody, they're spewing and they're talking about their purpose from the minute you sit down with them. That was the thing I found about LinkedIn. I was always hearing from them about their purpose and how they believed in this value of members first, like all the time, across the company, up and down throughout the organization. It was incredible to see that level of commitment, that singularity. And they all said it in different ways. But I asked, why did you do this? Well, we have this value of members first. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Are you seriously spewing me one of your values and explaining why you did something? Well, of course. Why wouldn't I do that?
And it's
That's how you know
embodying
you
the
create.
values. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So that's how you know that you create a movement when everyone else sees themselves as part of it.
and that word purpose. Wow, it's something many of us really deeply, deeply desire, and oftentimes we're not quite sure what our own personal purpose is, if you will. And if I don't know that, then how do I know if I'm aligned with the company's purpose, right? Am I honoring myself if I'm going along with this or not, right? Which might create resistance to the disruption, if you will, to the change. So I know this is getting a little bit off topic, but what advice, if any, do you have for people around how to clarify what that is for themselves?
When you keep a journal and you go back and you look and you assess things and you review things, you go, take a moment to say, when were times when you just felt great about the work that you were doing? What made you come alive? And what made you say at the end of the day, that was a great day? What were the things that you were doing? What were the things you were accomplishing, the people you were with? And just go back and just trace out some of those great days. Or if at the end of a day, I had a great day today, what made it so great? Jot down those things. And what I realized that made me feel just amazing, what gave me a sense of purpose, of impact, was this aha moment when people go from a state of confusion to a state like, oh, now I get it. And then they take action on it. And so I define my purpose as catalyzing transformation to maximize human potential. That's my purpose. And I have considered myself to be so lucky, so lucky to be working with an organization, PA Consulting, where the purpose is, the belief is we tap into the power of ingenuity to build a positive human future. And I sit down and I talk in meetings and it comes out in every single meeting. Well, how is this really oriented towards an optimistic future? Like when we're talking about thought leadership, it can't be hack jobs. It needs to be talking about this potential optimistic human future. How are we going to be ingenious in the work that we do? That doesn't seem as ingenious as it could be. How can we bring in two completely different groups in an organization to come up with a better solution than we have today? Because that's what we do. We use the power of ingenuity. So it comes up all the time. And we measure our success not just by financial success, but by the social value we're creating in the work that we do. So it's amazing to be aligned with people like this. And we talk about it all the time. Our purpose statements are the first slide we see in our presentations, internally and externally. That's a constant reminder from the top of the organization, from the CEO who embodies this all the time, to individuals and individual meetings. And it comes across in even our casual conversations. So when we truly are able to live our values, our purpose in alignment with other people. When I started my company, people were asked, what's the best part of being a founder, owner, CEO of a company? Is it like you have control? Like, oh no, you have no control. You're constantly worried about cash. It's a nightmare. But the best part about it is that you go to work every day with people aligned with your purpose and your mission and your values. That's the best part. It's the most amazing part.
And it starts with us, yes, to clarify what that is for us. We are our own future client, if you will. What is it that I'm moving towards? What do I want to create in the world? And, helping people to really receive that, to understand the deeper purpose in that, and to welcome them to decide, is that in alignment with them or not? Yeah.
I like to say that we spend more time organizing our Spotify playlists than we do on really centering ourselves on our purpose, our values, our careers, investing in it. So it doesn't take that much time, but it does require focus. That this is important to us. And you were saying, treat ourselves as our future client. You would not stand up your client for a meeting. You would not ignore your client. You would not, set aside time to work on yourself and then cancel it because something else came across. You would never do that to your most important client. So treat yourself as your most important client and devote the time to do this, to help your client be strong and be centered and focused, strategic. Because you are the most important client. If you don't take that time, no one else is going to do it for you.
Well, I agree with you that we don't take the time to consciously focus on what is it that we're doing all of this for, what's the deeper meaning. And the more clear we are about that, the better we can articulate that to our current clients, to potential future clients, and of course, potential new team members. So that third piece, right? So we've got, right, see the future client. We've got the kind of create momentum, right? Create that movement. And then the third piece, which is you talked about processes and so on for that flux culture. Tell us about that.
Yes, I talked about it a little bit before, in that these organizations have really thought through the kind of structure organizationally, the processes, and also what I call lore, L-O-R-E, which are the rituals, the symbols, the stories, the soft things that can't really be put on paper, that make up your culture. And culture fundamentally are your beliefs and your behaviors. So if you don't like your culture, then you can change it by changing your beliefs and your behaviors. And all these other things become the operating model for your culture, the structure, the processes, and the lore to support those beliefs and behaviors, to ingrain them deeply into the organization. So I'm working with a couple of organizations who are going through culture changes right now, culture transformations, to support their strategies. And one of the things they've expressed so much frustration is, like, we've tried everything to change our culture and nothing seems to be sticking. We have these work plans, these things, and consultancies come and spend months and years with us, but nothing seems to change. And I said, we're going to fix your culture in 2 days. Like, how is that going to happen? Like, we can do it just in a few hours. How is that going to happen? And I go, well, each individual, each leader, you know what's wrong with your culture. You know the beliefs and behaviors that are gunking things up, that are holding you back. You know what beliefs, new beliefs you need to replace them with to move your organization forward. So write those down. Okay, great, wrote them. So what are you personally going to do to make sure that these new beliefs are taken up and the old beliefs no longer exist? And they write those down. I go, put them up on the board. Okay, they put them up on the board. Here's your work plan. And it's a realization. They kept saying, like, where's the work plan? Where's the work plan? I'm like, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And they went, that's the work plan? I'm like, yeah, it starts with you. It starts with me. Each of us individually are going to change this culture. And you now have, if you accomplish even a third of these things, the culture is going to be completely different in weeks, because you have shown up differently as a leader. You have decided that your team is no longer going to believe in these things and instead replace them. And you're going to stamp out every opportunity for those old beliefs to exist. You can't give them a modicum of water and air, nothing. You see it, you go, no, that's not what we believe anymore. We believe in this. We're going to behave like this. Please come over to the side. I encourage you. I'll call you in to go do this. If you do this consistently as a leader, just on one of the new beliefs, you will have a fundamentally new culture in weeks. And that's what they've done. This one organization is seeing and they're a huge organization all around the world, billions of dollars in the manufacturing business, like not a technology, not a fast moving, not change oriented at all. And they're fundamentally changing their culture, one leader at a time. And they've asked the next level and the next level, and they've gone down like 4 or 5 levels to do the same exercise. What are you going to do to make this culture change happen? What's important to you? Where do you see the opportunities? And it's all just cascading down. That's what it takes. It's nothing more complex than that.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
it's as simple as that. Mm-hmm.
It is. And it's so exciting. In fact, those words, change starts with you, is right at the heart of the company that I own, Momentum Institute. And the image that kind of goes along with that is a lighthouse, right? You as the leader is that lighthouse, right? So no matter what is going on, it's kind of through your behavior, through everything that you radiate out, if you will, gets to help people to navigate change, to remind them of why we're doing this, to enlighten them as to the benefits for themselves, if they choose to join and stick with the mission or the movement. And, things can get pretty stormy sometimes, and we need that lighthouse to kind of come back home and to remember why we're waking up in the morning to go to work and do this beyond the paycheck. Yeah.
Right. It's got to be bigger than that. And we know that money is not the motivator for most people. And in fact, it's something like 45 or 47% of Gen Z today, the youngest generation, people in college, early 20s, mid 20s, say that they would be more willing to go work for a company that had a strong sense of purpose than one that paid them more money. They're willing to trade off a higher paycheck for working with an organization that had a strong sense of purpose that they align with. And I can't think of a better reason to say to companies, like, you really, but more than anything else, just for your own self, like, why wouldn't you want to work for a company that was purpose driven? But from a business with talent, retention, and recruitment perspective, we have to be much more focused on this and not do it at a superficial level, but do it at a deep level, and orient the entire organization around this.
So what would happen if companies don't do this, if leaders don't do this, if they don't create that flux culture, if you will, this capacity and safety to constantly go from change to change, disruption to disruption without skipping a beat? What might happen?
A couple of things. First of all, they lose opportunities to grow, and you just start stagnating. So your ability to grow drives everything. It drives the ability for you to maintain your market share as the markets continue to grow. So you'll start falling behind. Your competition will take business away from you. Your business will stagnate. Your margins will start shrinking. It'll be harder to retain people because they see other opportunities to go someplace else. It'll be harder to recruit people. So you don't have the talent base to be able to get you out of this rut. And so it becomes a downward spiral very, very quickly. Versus if you have the resilience, you can actually make an upward spiral, because resilience, then those same capabilities for change, allow you to take advantage of all the opportunities that come your way. The two are the same sides of the same coin. Your ability to deal with flux also gives you the opportunities, the ability to look for those opportunities that flux creates. I like to say that in the midst of change, the needs don't go away. They just shift, and where you shift with them. That's the key question. Can you shift with them? Can you detect the shifts fast enough to be able to follow them too?
So thank you so much, Charlene, again. And how can people learn more from you and, work with you so that they can create this change in their own company culture with ease?
Sure. You can see me, you can find me at my website, charleneli.com. Follow me on LinkedIn. I have newsletters there and personal newsletters you can sign up for. But really importantly, I would love to hear from you. What has your journey been like? Because this is how I do my research. This is how I can learn more and then share back all of the things that I'm hearing about is I need to hear from people who have been through this, who are going through this, going on this journey. So if you're trying to build resilience, if you're building an organization, trying to build an organization that can flux and with all the change, and you're striving towards that, I would love to hear about your experience. You don't have to need it have to figure it all out, but just what's working, what's not, that's invaluable for the work that I do. So please get in touch. Let's stay in touch and hope to talk to you all soon too.
Wonderful. And I'm so grateful that you extended that invitation because there's also a lot of value to them in sharing with you because sometimes in doing that, you get to really see what you might not have been able to see before. And in the awareness comes choice and, of course, wonderful resources from you. So I really hope people will reach out and share, and you can all learn together and then make our world an even better, more resilient place with lots of disruptions, good, good, ugly.
Yes.
Thank you.